sitting in a stadium. Big, bright lights, deafening cheering from the crowd, and even louder beating of the heart. As you catch a glimpse of the action, you see two cricketers running from crease to crease, or a goalie shuffling between the posts. Take a second to reflect. Who did you see? I reckon most of you saw these sweaty jerseys being boasted by men. And why wouldn't you? Upon introspection, I realized that I did too. As an ex-swimmer, this was sort of embarrassing that I automatically assumed that these athletes were men. When I thought about this, I remembered my dad would constantly tell me how he was obsessed with Muhammad Ali, Pele, or Kapil Dev, as I am with Virat Kohli, Floyd Mayweather, or Ronaldo. So, sorry, Dad, but I think this comes from you, as it does with most of us. India, the country that we're all in currently, is comprised of about 717.1 million men and 662.9 million women. This, if my math is correct and my rounding is correct, barely qualifies as a minority. Women make up about 48.06% of the Indian population. And still, in the rural parts of our India, things like sexual, physical, and emotional abuse are almost a norm. Married women are almost forced to wear veils, forced to start families when they may not be ready, forced to get married young. Zooming out, the issue of gender inequality is most certainly prevalent in my country. And this, unfortunately, holds true for several developing countries across the world. So, I'll ask you another question. Given this background, what role do women play in sports? Don't kid yourself, I'm pretty sure your answers, just like mine, were quite dismal. Now I ask, why is that? Sports, as we all know, either being bystanders or being sports people ourselves, have various benefits to the sports person itself. In a physical aspect, it improves their cardiovascular health, it improves their fitness, it improves their flexibility, agility, so on and so forth. As an ex-swimmer, I can attest to the fact that sports is great for character development, although I really did hate the 5 a.m. training sessions and the diet regimens. But that being said, sports has had a great influence in my life. So to think that several women across the country are shunned away from this is quite disheartening. While we've all enjoyed the biopics of Saina Nehwal, MC Mary Kom, and Mithali Raj, the reality is far from what the big screen proudly boasts. That being said, change is being made. However, most certainly not at the pace that it can and should be at. There are certain examples in our country itself that we can take as inspiration. For example, an action group based out of Tamil Nadu called Auroville has been functional for the past 20 years. Now, what Auroville does is essentially encourages married women to pursue kabaddi, a sport that is macho, that is rigorous, and definitely not something that married women, that mothers should be playing. They also organize inter-village tournaments that are normally held on Sundays when women have off from their domestic duties. What's quite brilliant about this is the fact that the husbands of these women are on par and take domestic responsibilities, taking care of the kids, taking care of the household, while these women are out there competing. What's most heartwarming about this entire situation is that they share their wives' victories. At the same time, a glimpse into the everyday newspaper is more than enough proof that sexual harassment and gender inequality in general are still an issue. Unfortunately, the patriarchy prevails. Now, we have several inspiring stories, but one that I'd like to bring attention to is that of Duti Chand, who is the second fastest female sprinter in Asia. Chand was reprimanded by international bodies for having too much testosterone. But Chand was banned from participating in competitions for over a year. It's humiliating as a girl to think that she had to fight for her rights just to compete, when she was the one who put India on the map when it came to sprinting. So, as any strong, empowered woman would, She took it up to the authorities, and after months and months and months of protesting, this rule was finally struck down in 2015. It was then deemed invasive and completely faulty. But of course, this was a time-taking process, and someone who won India laurels unfortunately lost an entire year of competing, which for any woman in a different aspect of her biological clock is a massive deal. I stand here citing stories of women coming from remote villages and impoverished backgrounds, but I have to acknowledge that I myself come from a place of privilege. Being born and brought up in one of the most urban places, that is Mumbai itself, I've come from a very liberal background. My parents were extremely encouraging and supportive of my career as a swimmer. Almost too supportive sometimes. I really did not want to attend those 5 a.m. sessions, if I'm being completely honest. That being said, I worked my way up from intra-school galas as this chubby little kid that could barely move in the water to finally ranking at the state level. And I hate to gloat, but it was definitely a story that I love sharing. I remember this one competition about 20 minutes before my race. My parents were searching for me all across the pool deck, and I was somewhere tucked away in the corner in the trial room, crying. Why, you ask? I was nervous, of course. This is the hardest thing I've had to do. I'd much rather be at my best friend's birthday party, but I'm here on a Saturday morning competing. And I'm probably going to lose, and it's a horrible feeling. And I swear I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but I overheard a conversation between one of the senior competitors from a small town in Karnataka. Although I couldn't comprehend much, it seemed to me that her mother was begging her to leave the competition to go home and meet a boy. For marriage, of course. To even fathom that an 18-year-old, that's the age I am right now, was being asked to get married is not something that I can process. Of course, she resisted and went on to set the record that evening on a national stage. So to now think that this girl, and I hope she sees this talk somewhere because it was genuinely a life-changing moment for me to just understand that our hardships are different and in various capacities. For me, I realize I'm lucky to be where I am. That being said, I have another question. Why is the state of affairs such that when we think about men in sports, it is still a viable career option, albeit it doesn't pay as well as being a doctor, an engineer, or a lawyer. But the minute we think about girls in sports, something about a girl with bulky arms and broad shoulders just elicits a negative reaction. Although the economic state of affairs in rural India and urban India might be slightly different, the social fabric of our country and most developing nations needs to undergo tectonic changes. I remember going home from that competition to my ever so loving and innocent grandmother, and she sat me down and she asked me, "Itni mardani ladki se shadi kaun karega?" At that point in time, I didn't completely understand what that meant, but loosely translated, it means, who would want to marry such a macho girl? Clearly, the way we think has been imbibed over generations, and this needs to change. Now, as I've already established, my math skills aren't that great. But in this year's Commonwealth Games, there were 35 instances of Indian women being on the podium. This doesn't seem proportional to the fact that there's millions of us and that we're 48.06% of the population. This needs to change. Now let's talk about some of the problems that girls in rural areas especially face. On a grassroots level, access to a nutritious diet is a huge problem. And anyone knows that proteins, carbohydrates, and again, all that biology stuff is extremely important for an athlete to be successful. On a deeper level, the issue seems to be that these girls don't even receive appropriate funding for equipment or for coaching or to just access basic facility that will help them get on a level playing field. Much like all of us, donors and sponsors would much rather sponsor a man over a woman. And of course, that's because men gain more traction when it comes to sports, and men are deemed more fit to play sports. As a woman in rural areas is expected to cater to the children, cater to the kitchen, cater to the man. Now, while this is changing, and while we have protests over social media, we have awareness being created, as I mentioned, change is at a much slower pace than it should be. What I ask of you is to show a little bit interest in this topic, whether that is learning a sport to teach a sport, or funding a nutritious meal, or even giving away your old equipment to a girl that might want to pursue sports. It will go a long way. In no way am I standing here and insinuating that every girl must compete and reach the level of a Saina Nehwal or an MC Mary Kom or a Mithali Raj. All I'm asking is for the luxury of choice, that a girl should get to choose at what level she wants to pursue a sport, and if she does in the first place. As I mentioned, sports go a long way in character development. And I've come to realize now, 2 years after stopping my career in swimming, that all it takes is courage, resilience, hard work, determination, and a little bit of talent. And I can guarantee that most of the girls that come from these impoverished backgrounds are already equipped with these skills, with these assets, with these qualities, simply because that's what they need to survive. So I ask you to give them a chance. I stand here today asking you to give them a chance, to hear me out, and to contribute to this cause in any way you can. Clearly, I don't look like I'm informed to play a sport myself, but I'm trying to explore new sports. I may never enter the pool again, sorry, mom and dad, but I'm trying to make a change in whatever capacity I can. As an avid reader and writer, I'm also part of the news team, and I'm trying to shed light on the stories of my peers who are hailing from Bihar or Aurangabad and are extremely talented football players and basketball players. Somehow, maybe sharing their stories will build solidarity within the campus and within the community. And I hope to expand upon this later on. After all, coming from a motherland, we must all acknowledge and realize that a country is only as strong as its mothers and daughters are. And this doesn't just apply to India, but all developing nations across the world. So all I ask is for a chance. Thank you.